An NBA championship means that a team reached the top of the mountain. In that moment, the players achieved their lifelong dream. They spend the entire night, week, or even month celebrating, and their entire city even throws them a parade. But then the next season comes around, and it starts all over again. And while there's been some teams throughout NBA history that just keep winning and winning and winning, there's been a select few that instantly started losing. So here's 10 teams that won a championship or made an NBA Finals, then either missed the playoffs or performed terribly once they got there the next season. One of the most popular cases of this happened back in 1999 to the Chicago Bulls. You see, because of course they three-peated thanks to Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, and Phil Jackson. Well, when owner Jerry Krause decided he wanted the team to rebuild instead, the Bulls didn't pick up Phil's contract. So Michael Jordan refused to play for another coach and retired, and most of the key pieces that just helped for a three-peat were either traded or not re-signed. Guys like Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Steve Kerr, and Luke Longley. So they went from a 62-20 record to end an NBA championship in 1998 to a 13-37 record in 1999. The shortened season was thanks to a lockout, but even had it been a full season, they were only on pace to win around 30 games, which is less than half of what they won the year before with their super team. And things were actually so bad that over the next 5 years, Chicago finished with 17 wins, 15, 21, 30, and 23 wins. Another all-time great actually found himself in a similar position in Kobe Bryant, because alongside Shaq, these two dominated the league and three-peated. Then they even made the finals for a fourth straight year, but when they lost to the Pistons, the whole team pretty much blew up, especially because that loss was extra tough, seeing that they now not only had Kobe and Shaq, but added Gary Payton and Karl Malone to the mix, but still lost. These guys together were able to lead LA to 56 wins, but it didn't matter. So Shaq is traded for a deal centered around Lamar Odom, Karl Malone retires, Gary Payton and Rick Fox get traded in a bad deal to Boston, and Derek Fisher leaves for Golden State. So I think it'd be no surprise to anyone what happens next. With the Lakers championship squad completely broken up and only Kobe Bryant still left to show for it, the next year they finished with a 34-48 record and missed the playoffs entirely. I mean, they went from a starting five of Gary Payton, Kobe Bryant, De'Vion George, Karl Malone, and Shaq to Chucky Atkins, Kobe Bryant, Caron Butler, Lamar Odom, and Chris Mim. But shout out to Kobe and the Lakers front office because it only took them 3 more years to make it back to the NBA Finals. But speaking of the LA Lakers, this actually isn't the only time this has happened to them either, because they're also the latest team to make this video, seeing how something similar happened to them in 2021. But not only them, also the Miami Heat, because both teams played in the bubble NBA Finals. Some people say it was harder than a normal championship, but that's really up for debate, seeing that neither team in this finals even made it past the first round the very next season. And it was tough. The Lakers won the championship and they deserved it. Everyone was healthy throughout their entire run, and they had a team stacked full of supporting players around LeBron and AD. But then the next season, a few of those guys left, and LA superstars just couldn't stay healthy, playing in a combined 81 games between the two of them. And when the playoffs came around, it was already too late, and the defending champions won only 2 games against the Phoenix Suns. Then for the Miami Heat that year, it's a different story because everyone on their team stayed fully healthy all season long the next year, and they had kept together their entire group of guys from their finals run. If anything, it seemed like their team only got stronger. So expectations were high in the 2021 playoffs, but instead, they got swept by the Bucks in the first round. The team they had just beaten 4 games to 1 the previous year swept them and knocked them out. It was a massive fall off with only 1 year's difference, unless you just consider it a fluke altogether that they even made that finals run in the first place. But speaking of the Heat, they had another major collapse back in 2007. I mean, first off, we have to give them credit. The first year Wade and Shaq played together, they won 59 games and were only 1 game away from making the NBA Finals. Then in 2006, they won a championship running through some tough teams, so it only took Shaq and Dwayne 2 years of playing together to win a title. And coming back into the next season as defending champs, these guys were expected to run it back or at least compete. But when both Shaq and D-Wade were out for the most of the year due to injuries, the Heat struggled and they just weren't the same come playoff time. So not only did they lose to the Bulls in the first round, but they got swept. But it got even worse, with more injuries to both stars the next season and problems in the locker room leading to Shaq getting traded once again. The Miami Heat now finished with a 15-67 record, which was by far the worst in the league. So within 2 years, this team went from an NBA championship to the bottom of the league. This shouldn't sound so unfamiliar though, because we've actually seen something like this fairly recently with the Golden State Warriors. And they had one of the biggest single season fall-offs of all time, because they had just created a dynasty, creating superstars and future Hall of Famers, making 5 straight NBA Finals and winning 3 of them. Well, when in the last one Kevin Durant tears his Achilles, gets traded, and Klay Thompson tears his ACL, the 2019 season is starting to look terrible for them. And it gets worse when 4 games into it, Steph injures his hand and is out for the year. So it's basically up to Draymond Green, D'Angelo Russell for half the year, and Andrew Wiggins for the other half of it. And to nobody's surprise, the Warriors ended up finishing with the worst record in the NBA by far at 15-50. And then even the season after that, Klay was still out, and they ended up with a 39-33 record, missing the playoffs again. So they went from 5 straight finals runs to missing the playoffs the next 2 years. And then immediately after that, they turned things around and won an NBA championship. And then they almost qualified again for this list for this season, because now after being the defending champions, with them being healthy for the most part for most of the year, they're just barely making it into the playoffs. I know they've had a few injuries here and there, but even before then, they were on this bad pace. So the Warriors, a pretty confusing team these days. We've mentioned a couple of recent teams though, so now let's switch it up and bring it back to the 1969 and 70 Boston Celtics. You see, because Bill Russell won them 11 championships in 13 years. He even won them a title against the Lakers in his very last season in the league. He did so by leading his team to a 48-34 record. Well, then he retires, and with pretty much the exact same team minus maybe 1 or 2 guys, the Celtics now finish with a 34-48 record and missed the playoffs completely. So with a 34-year-old Bill Russell, an NBA championship, and without him, they don't even make the postseason. And it wasn't until 5 years later that the Celtics made it out of the first round again. And when losing a superstar of that caliber, it's obviously always going to take a big toll. Just ask LeBron James. You see, he went to the Miami Heat to join Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, and obviously with their super team, they dominated the league, winning 2 NBA championships and making the finals all 4 years together. And even though they lost to the Spurs in their last year as a team, it was no doubt that all year long they were bound to at least make it to the finals, and they convincingly dominated every team on their way there. But then in the 2014 offseason, LeBron James returns home to the Cavs as a free agent, leaving his former team and best friends in a tough situation. And even though they had a pretty solid roster of players, Chris Bosh only played half the year before being ruled out with blood clots, and D-Wade wasn't able to lead his teammates to the postseason, so they instead finished out with a 37-45 record, which does make sense with everything going on. And they spent years struggling after that, trying to find a new identity after Wade retired, and Bosh was forced to due to his condition. But this wasn't the only time LeBron caused the team to go straight from the finals to the bottom of the league, because while the Cavs benefited from this in 2014, they also got their karma repaid to them 4 years later when LeBron left for the Lakers. You see, almost exactly like his time in Miami, LeBron joins the Cavs with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love. He makes the finals every single one of those 4 years he was there, but he only wins 1 of them. In his first 3 years, it was obvious the Cavs were going to make the finals every year, but in his last season, Kyrie Irving left the team, so it seemed like they were lucky to make it for a 4th season. But that meant that when LeBron also leaves the team as a free agent in the 2018 offseason, the Cavs are now only left with Kevin Love, so this was crazy. They had 27 different players on their roster throughout that season, with all of them being role players. And no one on the team averaged over 20 points a game, so it was no surprise they finished with a terrible 19-63 record, which was a pretty rough transition for all of LeBron's teammates who had just dominated the Eastern Conference for the past 4 years. But a superstar leaving isn't the only thing that can cause this to happen to a team, because the 2011 Dallas Mavericks lost some role players and the same thing happened to them. You see, the 2011 championship was one of the most impressive performances by a team in NBA history. They only had 1 star in Dirk Nowitzki, but over the years they had assembled the perfect combination of team chemistry and role players to play in their system, which led to a finals run of beating the best players the league had to offer all in 1 year. I mean, this Mavs team was no joke. They swept Kobe Bryant and the Lakers at full strength, only lost 1 game to KD, Russ, and Harden in OKC, then beat the Heat's newly formed super team in 6 in the finals. So this was great. The players and Mark Cuban had gotten what they always wanted. And Mark Cuban was a guy that had always been willing to spend whatever amount of money he had to build a championship caliber team. But it just seems like he either got greedy afterwards, lost sight of the mission, or was just happy with the 1 championship they got, because the next offseason was a disaster. They let Tyson Chandler walk as a free agent, along with Caron Butler, Deshaun Stevenson, and JJ Barea. And they were heavily talked about in rumors to be making a play at Dwight Howard and Darren Williams, who were supposed to be free agents that year. And something like that may have made sense. But then when they didn't get either man and instead signed Vince Carter, Brendan Hayward, Delonte West, and Lamar Odom, it made no sense at all. So the team who had just won the title now finished with a 36-30 record and got swept in the first round by a Thunder team that they had just beaten last year, which was a terrible look on Mavs ownership. Now, if you enjoyed the video, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.